Hello guys and welcome back to another day of Inktober. Today's day is 16 of Inktober 2022 and I've got a little bit of a treat as it is Sunday, and normally I would have a Sunday story time, an episode of a story game, but as I'm still keeping continuity here on my YouTube channel and playing games over on my Twitch, and I'll be uploading those later. I won't be playing that game this week, but you will still have a story. As the word is fowl today, I thought I would go in and see what I could find for fowl, and see if I can find any books to come up with fowl. The only thing that came up was Artemis fowl. Now, I was toying with the idea whether I should do a Artemis fowl who's standing there, turn Artemis fowl into a chicken. Then I thought to myself, Artemis, now that's a mythical character with a bow and arrow, and the word fowl is also named for a bird, or not a bird, but breed of chicken, and breed of chicken. Well, it's a breed of animal, generally known as the ones you would have like for lunch and Sunday lunch. And we're going to have some chicken later on myself. But it can mean duck, it can mean chicken. I'm going with more of a chicken for the fowl, and I'm going to mix up the word Artemis fowl, but I'm going to flip it on its head and call it fowl Artemis. And I'm going to be sort of trying to do an Artemis, but with more of a chicken features. And that's what I'll be trying to do today. You will be listening to Artemis fowl, but like I said, I'm not going to be doing an Artemis fowl, the actual book. Definitely not the Disney film. I'm leaning on to more the side of Artemis itself, or herself, but I'm going to be changing her features more into a chicken-like character. I have got my critter opened up already. As always, guys, as always this month, I am going to be doing a digital sketch. But instead of doing a sketch on paper, because I'm trying to practice doing digital freehand sketching at the moment, because I've moved on from paper and I've moved to digital artwork. I've got this tablet I'm using today, the UGEE is how you say it, or how it's spelled, UG I call it, and obviously using a pen as well. But like I said, I'm not going to be doing any paperwork. I'm going to be doing it all on digital, and I'm going to be doing this app called Critter, which is this here. I've already laid out where I want the picture to be, because I thought of doing a full picture, and then I saw a reference picture that sort of really spoke to me, where I'm going to pick the bow and the like a chickeny womany thing here. I'm going to try and do the chicken head more detailed than I am the body, really, but I didn't want to do a full character. Because I like the image of her in the moon, because she seems to have, I don't know much about the character Artemis, but I do know she's always depicted around the moon. So I thought it'd be cool to put her in a circle. I might put the half moon in there as well, but I definitely will be putting a bow, because she's very known for having a bow. And again, she'll be pulling back the bowstring and firing off an arrow. Might maybe change the arrow to something else. I don't know how silly I want to go with it. I've just got this idea of a fowl that's Artemis. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing today. Again, it's Story Time Sunday, and I don't want to let you down by not having a story to listen to on a Sunday, because I like to make you nice and relaxed and chilled on a Sunday. Something to listen to, or something to watch, just to let your Sunday time go a bit more relaxed and easier. If you do like today's stream and you want to comment, you can do, because the comments are open. And yeah, if I don't see them straight away, that means that I'm concentrating on what I'm drawing, or I'm using the reference and I can't see the comments up on the board. But they will be answered if they appear. Excuse me. If you're watching back, please, as always, leave a like if you do. And if you're watching back, you can still leave some comments in the comment bar, and I will answer those as fast as humanly possible. Generally straight away, if I see them straight away. But yeah, we got a picture here already. The ink pen that I'm going to be using is none of these here, because these are all my digital tools. But I have got a specific digital pack that I'm using, which comes with a digital hand brush. So a digital ink brush, sorry, a digital ink pen brush, pen brush. You know, you can get those type. And also a fountain pen for thinner and finer lines, which I use very occasionally, but it comes in very handy when I need it. Yeah, I won't be using the eraser because, as always, you cannot erase ink once it's on the paper, and that's the kind of similar rules that I'm keeping based around this Inktober challenge. The same rules, just different format, so not on paper, just in a digital form. This is something I would do anyway. I would just use a Copic marker to darken this out, or a Sharpie or something, and still keep this the same way. So I'm trying to keep within the parameters of realistic drawing, but I'm going to be doing it in digital, freehanding it all on my digital tablet. Again, this, I don't know if I told you, but this is Critter. It is a free program, so if you are trying to and have a low budget or no budget at all, you can go and get Critter for yourself. It is pretty much like a very basic form of Photoshop. You've still got all the tools. I don't know half of the tools do, because I just faff around with what I know. But you've got your different layers that you can do. So if you're going to be doing line work, you can do your colouring underneath, and then do all that, and you can do clipping, so everything stays in where it does. If you want more information on that, or if you want more on how I do all of that, definitely go and check out all the other videos. You can find most of those in the Creation Station playlist. But for now, we're getting those ink pens. So I'm going to click the one that I'm going to use straight away. I am. Oh yeah, if you don't have a tablet, you don't have an ink pen, if you don't have a pen or anything like that, you can use a mouse in this as well. So you can draw with a mouse. So this is how I started when I first started doing digital work. I had a mouse, and I've upgraded over time to get myself a tablet, which is why I want to practice with the tablet, because the mouse was a pain in the ass when I first started. But after a while, the disconnect from using a mouse to watching on the screen, it does get easier. And I would recommend, if you've drawn something on paper, to pull it in, take a picture of it, pull it into Critter. Again, I've shown you in different videos how to do all that. To do a reference, copy it over, and then sort of do your colouring afterwards. It taking a little bit of practice, like any art form. It does take a bit of practice, but once you get there, guys, you will love using Critter. So if you want to support them, type Critter in your Google or in your search engine. Find the free downloader and download to your heart consent. But otherwise, let's get back to what we're doing, which again is today's word is day 16 of, and the word is fowl. And again, I'm using the word Artemis as a loose thing to tag on to the fowl, because we're doing a fowl Artemis instead of Artemis fowl. But right, let's get my story queued up and ready to go. And again, it's Sunday story time, so you'll be listening to a story of Artemis. The books are in a bit of a weird they're in a bit of a weird order, so if I go from book 1 to book 2 or chapter 2, thing like that, I do apologise. I will try and keep it in linear fashion, so everything does come up as a story. You may even hear Artemis Fowl a couple times, but there's quite a few different books, so it's more of something for me to listen to, for you to listen to while I am doing, than keeping a constant thing to listen to. But anyway, let's get on to what I said I'm going to do and get that story going. I'll turn the mic off and we'll get to going on.
The cube's scan for surveillance beams was to have far-reaching. Though Artemis did not intend it, the cube's scan for surveillance beams was to have far-reaching repercussions. The search parameters were so vague that the cube sent probes into deep space, and of course, deep underground. Below the surface, the lower elements.
Just to let you know that this is Artemis. That I could not find the first book, but this is book 3, chapter 2. Again, I couldn't find chapter 1 for some reason. I couldn't find it. Maybe it's been removed. I don't know. This is chapter 2, Lockdown, book 3. We're going to be going through book 3 all the way to the end as much as possible as I can find. And then, if there is no more, I will listen to a bit of music towards the end, so you don't have to keep hearing the same book over and over again. But yeah, let's get. Sorry about that if I interrupted that, but let's get back and continue.
Elements police were stretched to their limits following the recent Goblin uprising. 3 months after the attempted Goblin takeover, most of the major players were in custody. But there were still isolated pockets of the Bawakale triad loping around Haven's tunnels with illegal soft-nosed lasers. Every available LAP officer had been drafted to help with Operation Mop-Up before the tourist season got started. The last thing the city council wanted was tourists spending their leisure gold in Atlantis because Haven's pedestrianized Central Plaza was not safe to wander through. Tourism, after all, accounted for 18% of the capital's revenue. Captain Holly Short was on loan from the reconnaissance squad. Generally, her job was to fly to the surface on the trail of ferries who had ventured above ground without a visa. If even one renegade ferry got himself captured by the Mudmen, then Haven would cease to be a haven. So, until every gang goblin was licking his eyeballs in Howler's Peak Correctional Facility, Holly's duties were the same as every other LEP officer: rapid response to any Bawakale alert. Today, she was escorting 4 rowdy goblin hoods to Police Plaza for processing. They had been found asleep in an insect delicatessen, stomachs distended by a night of gluttony. It was lucky for them that Holly had arrived when she did, because the deli's dwarf owner was on the point of lowering the scaly foursome into the deep fat fryer. Holly's ride along for Operation Mop-Up was Corporal Grubkelp, little brother to the famous Captain Troublekelp, one of the LEP's most decorated officers. Grub did not share his brother's stoic personality. "I got a hangnail cuffing that last goblin," said the junior officer, chewing on his thumb. "Painful," said Holly, trying to sound interested. They were driving along a Magna strip to Police Plaza, with the perpetrators manacled in the rear of their LEP wagon. It wasn't actually a regulation wagon. The Bawakale had managed to burn out so many police vehicles during their short-lived revolution that the LEP had been forced to commandeer anything with an engine and room in the back for a few prisoners. In reality, Holly was piloting a fast food van with the LEP acorn symbol spray-painted on the side. The motor-pooled gnomes had simply bolted the servicing hatch and removed the ovens. A pity they couldn't remove the grease smell. Grub studied his wounded finger. "Those cuffs have sharp edges. I should lodge a complaint." Holly concentrated on the road, though the Magna strip did the steering for her. If Grub did lodge a complaint, it wouldn't be his first or even his 20th. Trouble's little brother found fault with everything except himself. In this instance, he was completely wrong. There were no sharp edges on plexiglass vacuum cuffs. If there were, a goblin might think to poke a hole in the other mitt and allow oxygen to reach his hand, and nobody wanted goblins hurling fireballs in the back of their vehicles. "I know it sounds petty to lodge a complaint over hangnails, but no one could accuse me of being petty." "You petty? Perish the thought." Grub puffed up his chest. "After all, I am the only member of the LEP Retrieval 1 to have faced down the human butler." Holly groaned loudly. This, she fervently hoped, would dissuade Grub from telling his Artemis Fowl war story yet again. It grew longer and more fantastical each time. In reality, Butler had let him go, as a fisherman would a minnow. But Grub was not about to take a hint. I remember it well, he began melodramatically. It was a dark night. And, as though his very words carried immeasurable magic, every light in the city went out. Not only that, but the Magna Strip's power failed, leaving them stranded in the middle lane of a frozen highway. I didn't do that, did I? Whispered Grub. Holly didn't answer, already halfway out the wagon door. Overhead, the sun strips that replicated surface light were fading to black. In the last moments of half-light, Holly squinted toward the northern tunnel, and sure enough, the door was sliding down, emergency lights revolving along its lower edge. 200 feet of solid steel separating Haven from the outside world. Similar doors were dropping at strategic arches all over the city. Lockdown. There were only 3 reasons that the council would initiate a citywide lockdown: flood, quarantine, or discovery by the humans. Holly looked around her. Nobody was drowning, nobody was sick, so the Mudmen were coming. Finally, every fairy's worst nightmare was coming true. Emergency lights flickered on overhead. The sun strip's soft white glow was replaced by an eerie orange. Official vehicles received a burst of power from the Magna Strip, enough to get them to the nearest depot. Ordinary citizens were not so lucky. They would have to walk. Hundreds stumbled from their automobiles, too scared to protest. That would come later. Captain Short! Holly! It was Grub. No doubt he would be lodging a complaint with someone. Corporal, she said, turning back toward the vehicle, this is no time to panic. We need to show an example. The lecture petered out in her throat because of what was happening to the wagon. All LEP vehicles would have received a regulation 10-minute burst of power from the Magna Strip to get them and their cargo to safety. This power would also keep the plexiglass cuffs vacuumed. Of course, they weren't using an official LEP vehicle, and so it hadn't been cleared for emergency power. Something the goblins had obviously realized, because they were trying to burn their way out of the wagon. Grub stumbled from the cab, his helmet blackened by soot. They melted the cuffs off and started blasting the doors, he panted, retreating to a safe distance. Goblins. Evolution's little joke. Pick the dumbest creatures on the planet and give them the ability to conjure fire. If the goblins didn't stop blasting the wagon's reinforced interior, they would be encased by molten metal. Not a nice way to go, even if you were fireproof. Holly activated the amplifier in her LEP helmet. You there, in the wagon. Cease fire. The vehicle will collapse and you will be trapped. For several moments, smoke billowed from the vents. Then the vehicle settled on its axles. A face appeared at the grill, forked tongue slithering through the mesh. You think we're stupid, Elf? We're gonna burn clean through this pile of junk. Holly stepped closer, turning up the speakers. Listen to me, Goblin. You are stupid. Let's just accept that and move on. If you continue to fireball that vehicle, the roof will melt and you fall on you like shells from a human gun. You may be fireproof, but are you bulletproof? The Goblin licked his lidless eyes, thinking it over. You lie, Elf. We will blow a hole right through this prison. You will be next. The wagon's panels began to lurch and buckle as the goblins renewed their attack. Not to worry, said Grub from a safe distance. The fire extinguishers will get them. They would, corrected Holly, if the fire extinguishers weren't connected to the main power grid, which is shut down. A mobile food preparation wagon, such as this one, would have to adhere to the strictest fire regulations before setting one Magna wheel on the strip. In this case, several foam-packed extinguishers that could submerge an entire interior in flame-retardant foam in a matter of seconds. The nice thing about the flame foam was that it was hardened on contact with air. But the not-so-nice thing about flame foam was that the trip switch was connected to the Magna Strip. No power, no foam. Holly drew her Neutrino 2000 from its holster. I'll just have to trip this switch myself. Captain Short sealed her helmet and climbed into the wagon's cab. She avoided touching metal wherever possible, because even though microfilaments in her LEP jumpsuit were designed to disperse extra heat, microfilaments didn't always do what they were designed to do. The goblins were on their backs, pumping fireball after fireball into the roof panels. Knock it off, she ordered, pointing her laser's muzzle through the mesh. 3 of the goblins ignored her. One, possibly the leader, turned his scaly face to the grill. Holly saw that he had gotten an eyeball tattoos. This act of supreme stupidity probably would have guaranteed him promotion had the Bois Kill not been effectively disbanded. "You will not be able to get a thaw, elf," he said, smoke leaking from his mouth and slitted nostrils. "Then one of us will get you." The goblin was right, even if he did not realize why. Holly suddenly remembered that she could not fire during a lockdown. Regulations stated that there were to be no unshielded power surges in case Haven was being probed. Her hesitation was all the proof the goblin needed. "I knew it," he crowed, tossing a casual fireball at the grill. The mesh glowed red and sparks cascaded against Holly's visor. Over the goblin's head, the roof sagged dangerously. A few more seconds, and it would collapse. Holly unclipped a piton dart from her belt, screwing it into the launcher above the neutrino's main barrel. The launcher was spring-loaded, like an old-fashioned spear gun, and would not give off a heat flash. Nothing to alarm any sensors. The goblin was highly amused, as goblins often are just before incarceration, which explains why so many are incarcerated. "A dart? Are you going to prod us all to death, little elf?" Holly aimed at a clip protruding from the fire foam nozzle in the rear of the wagon. "Would you please be quiet?" she said, and launched the dart. It flew over the goblin's head, jamming itself between the rods of the nozzle clip. The piton cord stretched the length of the wagon. "Missed me," said the goblin, waggling his forked tongue. It was a testament to the goblin's stupidity that he could be trapped in a melting vehicle during a lockdown with an LAP officer firing at him and still think he had the upper hand. "I told you to be quiet," said Holly, pulling sharply on the piton cord and snapping the clip. 800 kilograms of extinguisher foam blasted from the diffuser nozzle at over 200 miles per hour. Needless to say, all fireballs went out. The goblins were pinned by the force of the already hardening foam. The goblin eater was pressed so forcibly against the grill that his tattooed eyes were easily legible. One said Mommy, the other said Duddy. A misspelling, though he probably didn't know it. "Ow," he said, more from disbelief than pain. He didn't say anything else because his mouth was full of congealing foam. "Don't worry," said Holly. "The foam is porous, so you'll be able to breathe, but it's also completely fireproof. So good luck trying to burn your way out." Grub was still examining his hangnail when Holly emerged from the van. She removed her helmet, wiping away the soot with the sleeve of her jumpsuit. The visor was supposed to be non-stick. Maybe she should send it in for another coating. "Everything all right?" asked Grub. "Yes, Corporal, everything is all right. No thanks to you." Grub had the audacity to look offended. "I was securing the perimeter, Captain. We can't all be action heroes." That was typical Grub, an excuse for every occasion. She would deal with him later. Now it was vital that she get to Police Plaza and find out why the council had shut down the city. "I think we should get back to HQ, Grub offered. "The intelligence boys might want to interview me if the humans are invading." "I think I should get back to HQ, said Holly. "You stay here and keep an eye on the suspects till the power comes back on. Do you think you can handle that? Or are you too incapacitated with that hangnail?" Holly's red hair stood in sweat-slicked spikes, and her round hazel eyes dared Grub to argue. "No, Holly. Captain, you leave it to me. Everything is under control." "I doubt it," thought Holly, setting off at a run toward Police Plaza. The city was in complete chaos. Every citizen was on the streets staring at their dead appliances in disbelief. For some of the younger fairies, the loss of their cell phones were too much to bear. They sank to the streets, sobbing gently. Police Plaza was mobbed by inquiring minds, like moths drawn to a light. In this case, one of the only lights in town. Hospitals and emergency vehicles would still have juice, but apart from those, the LAP headquarters was the only government building still functioning. Holly forced her way through the crowd, into the lobby area. The police service lines ran down the steps and out the door. Today, everyone was asking the same question. What happened to the power? The same question was on Holly's lips as she burst into the Situation Room, but she kept it to herself. The room was already packed with the force's complement of captains, along with the 3 regional commanders and all 7 council members. "Ah," said Chairman Carhartes, "the last captain." I didn't get my emergency juice, explained Holly. Non-regulation vehicle. Cajartes adjusted his official conical hat. No time for excuses, Captain. Mr. Foley has been holding off on his briefing until you got here. Holly took her seat at the captain's table, beside Trouble Kelp. Grub okay? He whispered. He got a hangnail. Trouble rolled his eyes. No doubt he'll make a complaint. Foley, a centaur, trotted through the doors, clutching armfuls of discs. Foley was the LEP's technical genius, and his security innovations were the main reason that humans had not yet discovered the subterranean ferry hideaway. Maybe that was about to change. The centaur expertly loaded the discs, opening several windows on a wall-sized plasma screen. Several complicated-looking algorithms and wave patterns appeared on the screen. He cleared his throat noisily. I advised Chairman Cajartes to initiate lockdown on the basis of these readings. Recon's Commander Root sucked on an unlit fungus cigar. I think I'm speaking for the whole room here, Foley, when I say all I see are lines and squiggles. Doubtless it makes sense to a smart pony like yourself, but the rest of us are going to need some plain gnomish. Foley sighed. Simply put, really simply, we got pinged. Is that plain enough? It was. The room resonated with stunned silence. Pinged was an old naval term from back in the days when sonar had been the preferred method of detection. Getting pinged was slang for being detected. Someone knew the ferryfolk were down here. Root was the first to recover his voice. Pinged? Who pinged us? Foley shrugged. Don't know. It only lasted a few seconds. There was no recognizable signature, and it was untraceable. What do they get? Quite a bit. Everything Northern European. Scope, Sentinel, all our cams, downloaded information on every one of them. This was catastrophic news. Someone, or something, knew all about ferry surveillance in Northern Europe after only a few seconds. Was it human? Asked Holly. Or alien? Foley pointed to a digital representation of the beam. I can't say for certain. If it's human, it's something brand new. This came out of nowhere. No one has been developing technology like this as far as I know. Whatever it is, it read us like an open book. My security encryptions folded like they weren't even there. Cajartes took off his official hat, no longer concerned with protocol. What does this mean for the people? It's difficult to say. There are best and worst case scenarios. Our mysterious guest could learn all about us whenever he wishes and do with our civilization what he will. And the best case scenario? Asked Trouble. Foley took a breath. That was the best case scenario. Commander Root called Holly into his office. The room stank of cigar smoke, in spite of the purifier built into the desk. Foley was already there, his fingers a blur over the commander's keyboard. The signal originated in London somewhere, said the centaur. Well, you know that because I happened to be looking at the monitor at the time. He leaned back from the keyboard, shaking his head. This is incredible. It's like some kind of hybrid technology. Almost like our ion systems, but not quite. Just a hair's breadth away. The how is not important now, said Root. It's the who I'm worried about. What can I do, sir? Asked Holly. Root stood, walking to a map of London on the wall plasma screen. I need to sign out a surveillance pack. Go topside and wait. If we get pinged again, I want someone on site ready to go. We can't record this thing, but we can certainly get a visual on the signal. As soon as it shows up on the screen, we'll feed you the coordinates and you can investigate. Holly nodded. When's the next hotshot? Hotshot was LEP speak for the magma flares that recon officers ride to the surface in titanium eggs. Pod pilots refer to this seat-of-the-pants procedure as riding the hotshots. No such luck, replied Foley. Nothing in the pipes for the next 2 days. You have to take a shuttle. What about the lockdown? I've restored power to Stonehenge and our satellite arrays. We'll have to risk it. You need to get above ground and see if we need to stay in contact. The future of our civilization could depend on it. Holly felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This future of our civilization thing was happening more and more lately. The sonic blast from Butler's grenade had crashed through the kitchen door, sweeping stainless steel implements aside like grass stalks. The aquarium shattered, leaving the flagstones slick with water, plexiglass, and surprised lobsters. They skittered through the debris, claws raised. The restaurant staff were on the floor, bound and soaking, but alive. Butler did not untie them. He did not need hysteria right now. Time enough to deal with them once all threats had been neutralized. An assassin stirred, suspended halfway through a dividing wall. The manservant checked her eyes. They were crossed and unfocused. No threat there. Butler pocketed the old lady's weapon just the same. You couldn't be too careful. Something he was learning all over again. If Madame Co. could have seen this afternoon's display, she would have had his graduation tattoo lasered off for sure. The room was clear, but still something was bothering the bodyguard. His soldier's sense grated like two broken bones. Once again, Butler flashed on Madame Co., his sensei from the academy. The bodyguard's primary function is to protect his principal. The principal cannot be shot if you are standing in front of him. Madame Co. always referred to employers as principals. One did not become involved with principals. Butler wondered why this particular maxim had occurred to him. Out of the hundreds Madame Co. had drummed into his skull, why this one? It was obvious, really. He had broken the first rule of personal protection by leaving his principal unguarded. The second rule, do not develop an emotional attachment to the principal, was pretty much to smithereens too. Butler had become so attached to Artemis that it was obviously beginning to affect his judgment. He could see Madame Co. before him, nondescript in her khaki suit, for all the world like an ordinary Japanese housewife. But how many housewives of any nationality could strike so quickly that the air hissed? You are a disgrace, Butler. A disgrace to your name. It would better suit your talents to get a job mending shoes. Your principal has already been neutralized. Butler moved as though in a dream. The very air seemed to hold him back as he raced for the kitchen doors. He knew what would have happened. Arnaud Blunt was a professional. Vain, perhaps, a cardinal sin among bodyguards, but a professional, nevertheless. Professionals always inserted earplugs if there was any danger of gunfire. The tiles were slick beneath his feet, but Butler compensated by leaning forward and digging his rubber-soled toes into the surface. His intact eardrums picked up irregular vibrations from the restaurant. Conversation. Artemis was speaking with someone. Arnaud Blunt, no doubt. It was already too late. Butler came through the service door at a speed that would have shamed an Olympian. His brain began calculating odds the moment pictures arrived from his retinas. Blunt was in the act of firing. Nothing could be done about that now. There was only one option. Without hesitation, Butler took it. In his right hand, Blunt held a silenced pistol. You first, he said, then the ape. Arnaud Blunt cocked the gun, took aim briefly, and fired. Butler came from nowhere. He seemed to fill the entire room, flinging himself in the bullet's path. From a greater distance, the Kevlar in his bulletproof vest might have held, but at point-blank range, the Teflon-coated bullet drilled through the vest like a hot poker through snow. It entered Butler's chest half an inch below the heart. It was a fatal wound. The bodyguard's own momentum, combined with the force of the bullet, sent Butler crashing into Artemis, pinning him to the dessert trolley. Nothing of the boy was visible, save one Armani loafer. Butler's breathing was shallow and his vision gone, but he was not dead yet. Even though his brain's electricity was rapidly running out, the butler held on to a single thought. Protect the principal. Arnaud Blunt drew a surprised breath, and Butler fired 6 shots at the sound. He would have been disappointed with the spread had he been able to see it, but one of the bullets found its mark, clipping Blunt's temple. Unconsciousness was immediate, concussion inevitable. Arnaud Blunt joined the rest of his team, on the floor. Butler ignored the pain squashing his torso like a giant fist. Instead, he listened for movement. There was nothing locally, just the scratch of lobster claws on the tile. And if one of the lobsters decided to attack, Artemis was on his own. Nothing more could be done. Either Artemis was safe, or he was not. If not, Butler was in no condition to fulfill the terms of his contract. This realization brought tremendous calm. No more responsibility. Just his own life to live, for a few seconds at any rate. And anyway, Artemis wasn't just a principal. He was his only true friend. Madame Co. might not have liked this attitude, but there wasn't much she could do about it now. There wasn't much anybody could do. Artemis never liked desserts, and yet he found himself submerged in eclairs, cheesecake, and pavlova. His suit would have been absolutely destroyed. Of course, Artemis's brain was only throwing up these facts so he could avoid thinking about what had happened, but a 200-pound deadweight is a hard thing to ignore. Luckily for Artemis, Butler's impact had actually driven him through the trolley's second shelf, while the bodyguard remained on the ice cream ledge above. As far as Artemis could tell, the Black Forest gâteau had cushioned his impact sufficiently to avoid serious internal injury. Still, he had no doubt that a visit to the chiropractor would be called for. Possibly for Butler, too, though the man had the constitution of a troll. Artemis struggled out from underneath his manservant. With each movement, malignant cream horns exploded over him. "Really, Butler," grumbled the teenager, "I must begin choosing my business associates more carefully. Hardly a day goes by when we aren't the victims of some plot." Artemis was relieved to see Arno Blunt unconscious on the restaurant floor. "Another villain dispatched. Good shooting, Butler, as usual. And one more thing. I have decided to wear the bulletproof vest to all future meetings. That should make your job somewhat easier, eh?" It was at this point that Artemis noted Butler's shirt. The sight knocked the air from his chest like an invisible mallet. Not the hole in the material, but the blood leaking from it. "Butler, you're injured. Shot. But the Kevlar?" The bodyguard didn't reply, nor did he have to. Artemis knew science better than most nuclear physicists. Truth be told, he often posted internet lectures on this subject under the pseudonym M.Sc. Squire. Obviously, the bullet's momentum had been too great for the jacket to withstand. Possibly it had been coated with Teflon for extra penetration. A large part of Artemis wanted to drape his arms across the bodyguard's frame and cry as he would for a brother. But Artemis repressed that instinct. Now was the time for quick thinking. Butler interrupted his train of thought. "Artemis, is that you?" he said, the words coming in short gasps. "Yes, it's me," answered Artemis, his voice trembling. "Don't worry. Juliet will protect you. You'll be fine." "Don't talk, Butler. Lie still. The wound is not serious." Butler spluttered. It was as close as he could get to a laugh. "Very well, it is serious. But I will think of something. Just stay still." With his last vestige of strength, Butler raised a hand. "Goodbye, Artemis," he said. "My friend." Artemis caught the hand. The tears were streaming now, unchecked. "Goodbye, Butler." The bodyguard's sightless eyes were calm. "Artemis, call me Domovoy." The name told Artemis two things. One, his lifelong ally had been named for a Slavic guardian spirit. Second, graduates of Madame Coe's school were instructed never to reveal their first names to their principals. It helped to keep things clinical. Butler would never have broken this rule, unless it no longer mattered. "Goodbye, Domovoy," sobbed the boy. "Goodbye, my friend." The hand dropped. Butler was gone. "No!" shouted Artemis, staggering backward. This wasn't right. This was not the way things should end. For some reason, he had always imagined that they would die together, perhaps facing insurmountable odds in some exotic location. On the lip of Vesuvius, perhaps, or the banks of the mighty Ganges. But together, as friends. After all they had been through, Butler could not simply be defeated at the hands of some grandstanding second-rate muscle man. Butler had almost died before. The year before last, he had been mauled by a troll from the deep tunnels below Haven City. Holly Short had saved him then, using her fairy magic. But now there were no fairies around to save his bodyguard. Time was the enemy here. If Artemis had more of it, he could figure out how to contact the LEP and persuade Holly to use her magic once again. But time was running out. Butler had perhaps 4 minutes before his brain shut down. Not long enough, even for an intellect such as his. Artemis needed to buy some more time. Or steal some. Think, boy, think. Use what the situation provides. Artemis shut off the wellspring of tears. He was in a restaurant. A fish restaurant. Useless. Worthless. Perhaps in a medical facility he could do something. But here, what was here? An oven, sinks, utensils. Even if he did have the proper tools, he had not yet completed his medical studies. It was too late for conventional surgery, at any rate, unless there was a method of heart transplant that took less than 4 minutes. The seconds were ticking by. Artemis was growing angry with himself. Time was against them. Time needed to be stopped. The idea sparked in Artemis's brain in a flash of neurons. Perhaps he couldn't stop time, but he could halt Butler's passage through it. The process was risky, certainly, but it was the only chance he had. Artemis popped the dessert trolley's brake with his foot and began hauling the contraption toward the kitchen. He had to pause several times to drag moaning assassins from the vehicle's path. Emergency vehicles were approaching, making their way down Knightsbridge. Obviously, the sonic grenade's detonation would have attracted attention. There were only moments left before he could have to fabricate some plausible story for the authorities. Better not be here. Fingerprints wouldn't be a problem, as the restaurant would have had dozens of customers. All he had to do was get out of there before London's finest arrived. The kitchen was forged from stainless steel. Hobs, hoods, and work surfaces were littered with fallout from the sonic grenade. Fish flapped in the sink, crustaceans clicking across the tiles, and caviar dripped from the ceiling. There, at the back, a line of freezers, essentials in any seafood bistro. Artemis put his shoulder against the trolley, steering it to the rear of the kitchen. The largest of the freezers was of the custom-built pull-out variety often found in large restaurants. Artemis hauled open the drawer, quickly evicting the salmon, sea bass, and hake that was encrusted in the ice shavings. Cryogenics. It was their only chance. The science of freezing a body until medicine had evolved sufficiently to retrieve it. Generally dismissed by the medical community, it nevertheless made millions each year from the estates of rich eccentrics who needed more than one lifetime to spend their money. Cryogenic chambers were generally built to the exact specifications, but there was no time for Artemis's usual standards now. This freezer would have to do as a temporary solution. It was imperative that Butler's head be cooled to preserve the brain cells. So long as his brain functions were intact, he could theoretically be revived, even if there was no heartbeat. Artemis maneuvered the trolley until it overhung the open freezer. Then, with the help of a silver platter, he levered Butler's body into the steaming ice. It was tight, but the bodyguard fit with barely a bend of the legs. Artemis heaped loose ice on top of his fallen comrade, and then adjusted the thermostat to 4 degrees below freezing, to avoid tissue damage. Butler's blank eyes stared at him through a layer of ice. "I'll be back," the boy said. "Sleep well." The sirens were close now. Artemis heard the screech of tires. "Hold on, domovoy," whispered Artemis, closing the freezer door. Artemis left through the back door, mingling with a crowd of locals and sightseers. The police would have had someone photographing the crowd, so he did not linger or even glance back toward the restaurant. Instead, he made his way to Harrod's and found himself a table at the Gallery Cafe. Once he had assured the waitress that he was not looking for his mommy and produced sufficient cash to pay for his pot of Earl Grey tea, Artemis pulled out his cell phone, selecting a number from the speed dial menu. A man answered on the second ring. "Hello. Make it quick, whoever you are. I'm very busy at the moment." The man was Detective Inspector Justin Barr of New Scotland Yard. Barr's gravelly tones were caused by a hunting knife across the gullet during a bar fight in the 90s. If Butler had not been on hand to stop the bleeding, Justin Barr would never have risen beyond sergeant. It was time to call in the debt. "Detective Barr, this is Artemis Fowl."
"Artemis, how are you? And how's my old partner Butler?"
Artemis kneaded his forehead. "Not well at all, I'm afraid. He needs a favor."
"Anything for the big man. What can I do?"
"Did you hear something about a disturbance in Knightsbridge?" There was a pause. Artemis heard paper rip as a fact was torn off the roll.
"Yeah, just came in. A couple of windows were shattered in some restaurant. Nothing major. Some tourists got a bit shell-shocked. Preliminary reports say it was some kind of localized earthquake, if you can believe that. We've got 2 cars there right now. Don't tell me Butler was behind it."
Artemis took a breath. "I need you to keep your men away from the freezers."
"That's a strange request, Artemis. What's in the freezers that I shouldn't see?"
"Nothing illegal," promised Artemis. "Believe me when I say this is life or death for Butler." Barr didn't hesitate.
"It's not exactly my jurisdiction, but consider it done. Do you need to get whatever I'm not supposed to see out of the freezer?"
The detective had read his mind. "As soon as possible. 2 minutes are all I need." Barr chewed it over.
"Okay, let's synchronize schedules. The forensics team is going to be there for a couple hours. Nothing I can do about that. but by 6:30, I can guarantee there won't be anyone on duty. You have 5 minutes.
That will be more than sufficient.
Good. And tell the big man that we're even.
Artemis kept his voice even. Yes, Detective Barr, I'll tell him. If I get the opportunity, he thought. The Ice Age Cryogenics Institute was not actually on London's Harley Street. Technically, it was tucked away in Dickens Lane, a side alley of the famous Medical Boulevard's southern end. But this did not stop the facility's MD, one Dr. Constance Lane, from putting Harley Street on all Ice Age stationery. You couldn't buy credibility like that. When the upper classes saw those magic words on a business card, they fell over themselves to have their frail frames frozen. Artemis Fowl was not so easily impressed, but then he had little choice. Ice Age was one of the 3 cryogenic centers in the city, and the only one with free units. Though Artemis did consider the neon sign a bit much. Pods to rent. Honestly. The building itself was enough to make Artemis squirm. The facade was clash and brushed aluminum, obviously designed to resemble a spaceship, and the doors were of the whoosh Star Trek variety. Where was culture? Where was art? How did a monstrosity like this get planning permission in historic London? A nurse, complete in white uniform and 3-cornered hat, was supervising the reception. Artemis doubted she was an actual nurse. Must have been the cigarette between her false nails. "Excuse me, miss?" The nurse barely glanced up from her gossip magazine. "Yes, are you looking for someone?" Artemis clenched his fists behind his back. "Yes, I would like to see Dr. Lang. She is the surgeon, is she not?" The nurse ground out her cigarette in an overflowing ashtray. "This is not another science project, is it? Dr. Lang says no more projects." "No, not another school project." "You're not a lawyer, are you?" asked the nurse suspiciously. "One of those geniuses who gets a good degree while they're still in diapers." Artemis sighed. "A genius, yes. A lawyer, hardly. I am, mademoiselle, a customer." And suddenly the nurse was all charm. "Oh, a customer! Why didn't you say so? I'll show you right in. Would sir care for tea, coffee, or perhaps something stronger?" "I am 13 years old, mademoiselle." "A juice?" "Tea would be fine. Earl Grey, if you have it. No sugar, obviously. It might make me hyperactive." The nurse was quite prepared to accept sarcasm from an actual paying customer, and directed Artemis to a lounge where the style was, again, space age. Plenty of shining velour and eternity mirrors. He had half finished a cup of something that was most definitely not Earl Grey when Dr. Lane's door swung open. "Do come in," said a tall woman uncertainly. "Shall I walk?" asked Artemis, "or will you beam me up?" The office walls were lined with frames. Along one side were the doctor's degrees and certificates. Artemis suspected that many of those certificates could be obtained over the weekend. Along the wall were several photographic portraits. Above those read the legend, "Love lies sleeping." Artemis almost left then, but he was desperate. Dr. Lane sat behind her desk. She was a very glamorous woman, with flowing red hair and with tapered fingers of an artist. Even her smock was Dior. Constance Lane's smile was perfect. Too perfect. Artemis looked closer and realized that her entire face was the handiwork of a plastic surgeon. Obviously, this woman's life was all about cheating time. He had come to the right place. "Now, young man, Tracy says you wish to become a customer." The doctor tried to smile, but the stretching made her face shine like a balloon. "Not personally, no," replied Artemis, "but I do wish to rent one of your units, short term." Constance Lane pulled a company pamphlet from the drawer, ringing some figures in red. "Our rates are quite steep." Artemis did not even glance at the numbers. "Money is no object. We can set up a wire transfer right now from my Swiss bank. In 5 minutes you can have £100,000 sitting in your personal account. All I need is a unit for a single night." The figure was impressive. Constance thought of all of the nips and tucks it would buy, but she was reluctant. "Generally, minors are not allowed to commit relatives to our chambers. It's the law, actually." Artemis leaned forward. "Dr. Lane, Constance, what I'm doing here is not exactly legal, but no one is being hurt either. One night and you're a rich woman. This time tomorrow and I was never here. No bodies, no complaints." The doctor's hand flew to her jawline. "One night?
Just one. You won't even know we're here. Constance took a hand mirror from her desk drawer, studying her reflection closely. Call your bank, she said. 2 LEP shoots emerged in the south of England, one in London itself, but that was closed to the people because the Chelsea Football Club had built the grounds 500 yards above the shuttle port. The other port was in Wiltshire, beside what humans referred to as Stonehenge. Mud people had several theories as the origin of the structure. Hypotheses ranged from spaceship landing port to pagan center of worship. The truth was far less glamorous. Stonehenge would actually been an outlet for flat bread-based food, or in human terms, a pizza parlor. A gnome called Bog had realized how many tourists forgot their sandwiches on above-ground jaunts, and so had set up shop beside the terminal. It was a smooth operation. You drove up to one of the windows, named your toppings. 10 minutes later, you were stuffing your face. Of course, Bog had to shift his operation below ground once humans began talking in full sentences. And anyway, all that cheese was making the ground soggy. A couple of service windows had even collapsed. It was difficult for civilians to get visas to visit Stonehenge because of the constant activity on the surface. Then again, hippies saw fairies every day and it never made the front page. As a police officer, Holly didn't have a visa problem. One flash of the recon badge opened a hole right through to the surface. But being a recon officer didn't help if there was no magma flare scheduled, and the Stonehenge chute had been dormant for over 3 centuries. Not a spark. In the absence of a hotshot to ride, Holly was forced to travel aboard a commercial shuttle. The first available shuttle was heavily booked, but luckily there was a late cancellation, so Holly wasn't forced to bump a passenger. The shuttle was a 50-seater luxury cruiser. It had been commissioned especially by the Brotherhood of Bog to visit their patron site. These fairies, mostly gnomes, dedicated their lives to pizza, and every year on the anniversary of Bog's first day of business, they chartered a shuttle and took a picnic above ground. The picnic consisted of pizza, tuber beer, and pizza-flavored ice cream. Needless to say, they did not remove their rubber pizza bonnets for the entire day. So, for 67 minutes, Holly sat wedged between 2 beer-swilling gnomes singing the pizza song. Pizza, pizza, fill up your face. The thicker the pastry, the better the base. There were 114 verses, and it didn't get any better. Holly had never been happier to see the Stonehenge landing lights. The actual terminal was pretty comprehensive, boasting a 3-lane Visa clearance booth, entertainment complex, and duty-free shopping. The current souvenir craze was a Mudman hippie doll that said, "Peace, man," when you pressed its tummy. Holly battered her way through the customs line, taking a security elevator to the surface. Stonehenge had become easier to exit recently, because the Mudmen had put up fencing. The humans were protecting their heritage, or so they thought. Strange that Mudmen seemed more concerned about the past than the present. Holly strapped on her wings, and once the control booth had given her the go-ahead, she cleared the airlock, soaring to a height of 7,000 feet. There was plenty of cloud cover, but nonetheless she activated her shield. Nothing could spot her now. She was invisible to human and mechanical eyes. Only rats and 2 species of monkey could see through a fairy shield. Holly switched on the onboard navigator in the wing's computer and let the rig do the steering for her. It was nice to be above ground again, and at sunset too, her favorite time of day. A slow smile spread across her face. In spite of the situation, she was content. This is what she was born to do. Recon, with the wind against her visor and a challenge between her teeth. It had been almost 2 hours since Butler had been shot. Generally, the grace period between heart failure and brain damage is about 4 minutes, but that period can be extended if the patient's body temperature is lowered sufficiently. Drowning victims, for example, can be resuscitated for up to an hour after their apparent death. Artemis could only pray that his makeshift cryogenic chamber could hold Butler in stasis until he could be transferred to one of the Ice Age's pods. Ice Age Cryogenics had a mobile unit for transporting clients from the private clinics where they expired. The van was equipped with its own generator and full surgery. Even if cryogenics was considered crackpot medicine by many physicians, the vehicle itself would meet the strictest standards of equipment and hygiene. "These units cost £1 million apiece," Dr. Constance Lane informed Artemis as they sat in the stark white surgery. A cylindrical cryopod was strapped to a gurney between them. The vans are custom made in Munich, specifically armored too. This thing could drive over a landmine and come out smiling. For once, Artemis was not interested in gathering information. That's very nice, Doctor, but can it go any faster? My associate's time is running out. It has already been 127 minutes. Constance Lane tried to frown, but there wasn't enough slack skin across her brow. 2 hours? Nobody's ever been revived after that long. Then again, no one has ever been revived from a cryogenic chamber. The night bridge traffic was, as usual, chaotic. Harrods was running a one-day sale, and the block was besieged by droves of eager customers lining up for access to the luxury store. It took a further 17 minutes to reach N. Finn's delivery entrance. Just as promised, there were no policemen present, except one. Detective Justin Barr himself was standing sentry at the rear door. The man was huge, a descendant of the Zulu nation, according to Butler. It was not difficult to imagine him at Butler's side in some faraway land. Incredibly, they found a parking space, and Artemis climbed down from the van. "Cryogenics," said Barr, noting the vehicle's inscription. "You think you could do anything for him?" "You looked in the freezer, then," said Artemis. The detective nodded. "How could I resist? Curiosity is my business. I'm sorry I checked now. He was a good man." "Is a good man," insisted Artemis. "I am not ready to give up on him yet." Barr stood aside to admit 2 uniformed Ice Age paramedics. "According to my men, a group of armed bandits attempted to rob the establishment, but they were interrupted by an earthquake. And if that's really what happened, I'll eat my badge. I don't suppose you can throw any light on the situation." A competitor of mine disagreed with a business strategy. It was a violent disagreement. "Who pulled the trigger?" "Arno Blunt, a New Zealander. Bleached hair, tattoos on his body and neck. Most of his teeth are missing." Barr took a note. "I'll circulate the description to the airports. You never know, we might catch him." Artemis rubbed his eyes. "Butler saved my life. The bullet was meant for me." "That's Butler, all right," Barr nodded. "If there's anything I can do." "You'll be the first to know," said Artemis. "Did your officers find anyone on the scene?" Barr consulted his notebook. "Some customers and staff. They all checked out, so we let them go. The thieves escaped before we arrived." "No matter. Better I deal with the culprits myself." Barr made a concerted effort to ignore the activity in the kitchen behind him. "Artemis, can you guarantee this is not going to come back to haunt me? Technically, we're looking at a homicide." Artemis looked Barr in the eye, which was quite an effort. "Inspector Barr, no body, no case. And I guarantee that by tomorrow, Butler will be alive and kicking. I should instruct him to call you, if that would set your mind at rest." "It would." The paramedics rolled Butler past on a gurney. A frosting of ice covered his face. Tissue damage was already turning his fingers blue. "Any surgeon who could fix this would have to be a real magician."
Okay, alright, so there is my fowl Artemis, not Artemis Fowl. Again, you were listening to Artemis Fowl. That was read by Jazzy J Audiobooks. If you want to go and check it out for yourself. I'm getting quite into that story, to be honest with you. Hearing it is better than watching the film. It's very it's sort of exciting, but it's not dull. As I say, it's quite good. If you're interested, go and check them out. But let's go back to what we've drawn today. It was day 16 and fowl, which means chicken or a fowl thing. I went obviously with a chicken. And because of the word, every time I think fowl, I think Artemis Fowl. That's the only thing that came into my head. I've been trying to do a bowed person or person holding a bow for a while, but it's not a person. It is a chicken. So it's fowl Artemis or a Artemis that's foul. I'm gonna try. I don't know if I want to put a bit of shading in there. I think it needs a little bit of something. A bit here and there. Not too much though. I want to put in the moon as well. But I don't know quite where I should put that. Whether I should make it as a full moon or like a crescent moon. I think I want to do a crescent moon around the curl of the bow. But other than that, I'm pretty much done on this illustration. So let me know what you think of today's drawing. Again, we've taken about an hour. I'm quite happy that it only takes me an hour each time, or an hour and a half, because drawing used to take me a couple hours before I was completely happy. But that is because I would sketch and then draw. Obviously, if I was doing Inktober, I'd only do a thing like I'm doing here. Just a basic drawing, with just using an ink pen, and that's what I've done. And gone over, just used a ink pen itself, and done with the thing I needed to draw. I'm looking at it going, should I put some shading on there? At least just a little bit, but I don't know if that's going to ruin it. I can put it on a layer underneath, so if I don't like it, I can always go back and change it. A lot, again, I was saying at the beginning in other streams that I want to colour a lot of these, so maybe I'll leave the colouring or the shading until I do the colouring. I don't know if you can tell, it's a female chicken as well. The male chickens have a bigger wobble, I don't know what you call them, a Mohican wobble on their head, and try to keep it as a female chicken because they have a smaller wobble at the front, and then less at the back. Yeah, I've used a reference for that. It's looking a bit dinosaur, but chickens kind of do look like mini dinosaurs anyway. But yeah, on the shading, I'm probably going to do it because it's in my head and I want to do it, because I think it needs it, but I do need to put that moon in. I want to use a tool for that, to bend the thing, because if I was using a traditional thing, paper and pen, then I'd get a half circle, or get the cup and do a half circle, get a cup or something in round, same size as the circle there, and do a half circle. I mean, I could kind of get away with doing a half circle with the circle tool. Give me a second while I go and grab the bits and bobs that I've got to grab. Just let me show you what I'm grabbing. All the tools are over here, you can see, and I'll just grab the circle tool. We're over there, pen, thank you. Circle tool, and maybe, because I don't want to mess this up, if I do a straight line here, and then, because I can't delete it, and then half quarter moon there, and there we go. Oh, I did what I thought I would. I've gone and drawn over it. Should have used the other layer. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to press back tool. I know I want to do that there. I want to do the half moon there. That didn't look very good anyway. So let's make it a bit smaller. Oh no, we're getting a bit bigger actually. So that line is underneath, but if I was to colour, there wouldn't be a line underneath. There's nothing I can do about that either, because it's obviously different layers, but as soon as I save this, it won't look like different layers, and you'll have a fat line under it. I'll do the moon afterwards. I think I'm gonna have to, because I can't colour. If I put any shading, it's only going to be shading. So let's just get rid of that. I think keep it as a full moon for now. Unless no, so whatever I do is going to be looking like it's over top. I could just get the shading tool and then get the think how large this will go. This will go that large. Okay, so if I turn down the opacity a smidge and make it as big as possible, and half circle it there, and I can tidy it up like so. Do down here. It gives me freedom to do a little bit of shading as well. I could now just follow that line with a smaller paintbrush. So let me zoom a second. Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of shading. So get back to the story and then I'll finish this one off.
Artemis glanced downward. That's the plan, Inspector Barr. That's the plan. Dr. Lane administered glucose injections in the van. These ought to stop the cells collapsing, she informed Artemis, massaging Butler's chest to circulate the medication. Otherwise, the water in his blood will freeze to spikes and puncture the cell walls. Butler was lying in an open cryo unit with its own gyroscopes. He had been dressed in a special silver freezer suit, and cold packs were heaped on his body like sachets of sugar in a bowl. Constance was unaccustomed to people actually paying attention when she explained the process, but this pale youth absorbed facts faster than she could present them. Won't the water freeze anyway? Glucose can't prevent that. Constance was impressed. Why, yes it will, but in small pieces, so it can float safely between cells. Artemis jotted a note in his handheld computer. Small pieces, I understand. The glucose is only a temporary measure, continued the doctor. The next step is surgery. We need to completely wash out his veins and replace the blood with a preservative. Then we can lower the patient's temperature and minus 30 degrees. I'll have to do that back at the institute. Artemis shut down his computer. No need for that. I just need him held in stasis for a few hours. After that, it won't make any difference. I don't think you understand, young man, said Dr. Lane. Current medical practices have not evolved to the point where this kind of injury can be healed. If I don't do a complete blood substitute soon, there will be severe tissue damage. The van jolted as a wheel crashed into one of London's numerous potholes. Butler's arm jerked, and for a moment, Artemis could pretend he was alive. Don't worry about that, Doctor. But 100,000 pounds, Doctor. Just keep repeating that figure to yourself. Park the mobile unit outside and forget all about us. In the morning we'll be gone. Both of us. Dr. Lane was surprised. Parked outside? You don't want to even come in? No, Butler stays outside, said Artemis. My, surgeon has a problem with dwellings, but I may enter for a moment to use your phone. I need to make a rather specific phone call. The lights of London were spread out below Holly like the stars of some turbulent galaxy. England's capital was generally a no-fly area for recon officers because of the 4 airports feeding planes into the sky. 5 years ago, Captain Troublecup had narrowly missed being impaled by a Heathrow JFK Airbus. Since then, all flight plans involving cities with airports had to be cleared personally by Foley. Holly spoke into her helmet mic. Foley, any fights coming in I should know about? Let me just bring it up on the radar. Okay, let's see. I'd drop down 500 feet if I were you. There's a 747 coming in from Malaga in a couple minutes. It won't hit you, but your helmet computer could interfere with its navigation systems. Holly dipped her flaps until she was at correct altitude. Overhead, the giant jet screamed across the sky. If it hadn't been for Holly's sonic filter sponges, both her eardrums would have popped. Okay, one jet full of tourists successfully avoided. What now? Now we wait. I won't call again unless it's important. They didn't have to wait long. Less than 5 minutes later, Foley broke radio silence. Holly, we got something. Another probe? Nope, something from Sentinel. Hold on, I'm sending over the file to your helmet. A sound file appeared in Holly's visor. Its wave resembled a seismograph readout. What is it, a phone tap? Not exactly, said Foley. It's one of a billion throwaway files that Sentinel sends us every day.
The Sentinel system was a series of monitoring units that Foley had piggybacked onto obsolete US and Russian satellites. Their function was to monitor all human telecommunications. Obviously, it would be impossible to review every phone call made each day, so the computer was programmed to pick up certain key words. If, for example, the words ferry, haven, and underground appeared in a conversation, this call would be flagged by the computer. The more people-related phrases that appear, the more urgent the rating. This call was made in London minutes ago. It's loaded with keywords. I've never heard anything like it. Play, said Holly clearly, using voice command. A vertical line cursor began scrolling across the sound wave. People, said a voice hazy with distortion. LAP, Magic, Haven, Shuttleports, Sprite, Royal, Trolls, Thumbs Raycon, Atlantis. That's it? That's not enough. Whoever made that call could be writing our biography. But it's just a string of words. It makes no sense. Hey, there's no point arguing with me, said the centaur. I just collect information. But there has to be a connection to the probe. Two things like this just don't happen on the same day. Okay, do we have an exact location? The call came from a cryogenics institute in London. Sentinel quality is not enough to run a voice recognition scan. We just know it came from inside the building. Who was our mystery mudman calling? Strange thing. He was calling the Times newspaper crossword hotline. Maybe those words were the answers to today's crossword? Said Holly hopefully. Nope, I checked the correction solution. Not a fair-related word in sight. Holly set her wings to manual. Okay, time to find out what our caller is up to. Send me the Institute's coordinates. Holly suspected that it was a false alarm. Hundreds of these calls came in every year. Foley was so paranoid that he believed the Mudmen were invading every time someone mentioned the word magic on a phone line. And with the recent trend of human fantasy movies and video games, magical phrases cropped up quite a lot. Thousands of police hours were wasted staking out the residents of dwellings where these phone calls originated, and it's usually turned out to be some kid playing on his PC. More than likely, this phantom phone call was the result of a crossed line, or some Hollywood hack pitching a screenplay, or even an undercover LAP operative trying to phone home. But then, today of all days, everything had to be checked. Holly kicked up her legs behind her, dropping into a steep dive. Diving was against recon regulations. All approaches were supposed to be controlled and gradual. But what was the point of flying if you couldn't feel the slipstream tugging at your toes? Artemis leaned against the cryogenics mobile unit's rear bumper. It was funny how quickly a person's priorities could change. That morning he had been worried about which loafers to wear with this suit, and now his dearest friend's life hung in the balance, and the balance was rapidly shifting. Artemis wiped a coating of frost from the spectacles he had retrieved from his bodyguard's jacket. These were no ordinary spectacles. Butler had 20/20 vision. These particular eyeglasses had been specially tooled to accommodate filters taken from an LP helmet. Anti-shield filters. Butler had carried them since the time when Holly Short almost got the jump on him at Fowl Manor. You never know, he said. We're a threat to LP security, and someday Commander Room could be replaced with someone who isn't quite so fond of us. Artemis wasn't convinced. The fairies were, by and large, a peaceful people. He couldn't believe they would harm anyone, even a mudman, on the basis of past crimes. After all, they had parted as friends. Or, at least, not enemies. That was presuming the call worked, but there was no reason to believe it wouldn't. Several government security agencies monitored phone lines using the keyword system, recording conversations that could compromise national security. And if humans were doing it, it was a safe bet that Foley was 2 steps ahead. Artemis donned the glasses, climbing into the vehicle's cabin. He had placed the call 10 minutes ago. Presuming Foley got to work on the trace straight away, it could still be another 2 hours before the LEP could get an operative on the surface. That would almost make it 5 hours since Butler's heart had stopped. The record for a revival was 2 hours and 50 minutes for an alpine skier frozen in an avalanche. There had never been a revival after 3 hours. Maybe there shouldn't be. Artemis glanced at the tray of food sent out by Dr. Lane. On another day, he would have complained about just about everything on the plate, but now the meal was simply sustenance to keep him awake until the cavalry arrived. Artemis took a long drink from a polyester cup of tea. It sloshed audibly around in his empty stomach. Behind him, in the van surgery, Butler's cryo unit hummed like a common household freezer.
Occasionally, the computer emitted electronic beeps and whirs as the machine ran self-diagnostics. Artemis was reminded of the weeks spent in Helsinki, waiting for his father to regain consciousness, waiting to see what the fairy magic would do for him. Today, my father spoke to me. For the first time in over 2 years, I heard his voice, and it's exactly as I remembered it. But not everything is the same. It had been over 2 months since Holly Short used her healing magic on his battered body, and he lays in his Helsinki hospital bed, immobile, unresponsive. The doctors could not understand it. He should be awake, they informed me. His brainwaves were strong, exceptionally so, and his heart beats like a horse. It's incredible this man should be at death's door, yet has the muscle tone of a 21-year-old. Of course, it's no mystery to me. Holly's magic.
Holly's magic is going to have to wait, and you're going to have to go and check that story out for yourself, because I am done. I can't see anything else that I'll need to put into this picture today. As it is digital, I'm happy with the way it's shaded, because I think once I put the colour in, it will enhance it that little bit more, and I'll be able to put a darker background to that. I don't want to put too much of a darker background, but I'd said I wanted to put in the moon. I think I've done that, and I've got the picture of a fowl, and I put Artemis in there as well. But Artemis, the Greek, I think it's Greek, or the mythical character of Artemis, and made it a fowl. Hopefully you enjoyed today's stream and you appreciate the little joke that I've done today as we listen to Artemis Fowl, and another Story Sunday done, but in a different way. Otherwise, guys, I will see you next time. Don't forget to hit that like button if you have liked today's stream, and if you're new, hit that subscribe button so you join in next time. Again, if you hit that bell, I will be back again tomorrow round about the same time, if not a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later. I've got a meeting going on tomorrow, so it depends on how long that goes on for and how long I think it's going to go on for, so depending on what our time will be. But it will be available to watch after anyway, so you can watch it at your leisure if you wish. But otherwise, again, thank you very much for watching. I will see you again tomorrow, and have a good Sunday.